All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started. Hope you're having a great day today. Today, I'm really excited to bring to you one of the most influential works in the early 1900s for the various genres that this channel covers: horror, science fiction, and fantasy. The gentleman had published this work that is so outside the box and so different that even reading it today, it's just so different and so evocative. The gentleman's name is Lord Dunsany. He was an Irish lord. The book is called The Gods of Pegana, which is one of the most influential books from that era. It was published in the early 1900s. Now, Lord Dunsany himself lived in an era of all of these epic heroes, these great heroes and so forth being written about in fiction, and his life was an epic hero. He was somebody who had done so much different things. He was definitely, his era sort of a Renaissance man. He did so many different things. For example, he comes from one of the oldest peerages in Ireland. His family had been one of the nobility in Ireland since the 1400s. And he had a lot of different things that he specialized in and did, because obviously, he didn't have to do as much working, but he still did a lot of stuff, and he threw himself at a lot of different things. He didn't just sit on his money. So, for example, one of the things he did was he loved chess. And so not only was he one of the best chess players of his day, he actually wrote the London Times' daily chess puzzles that they would have near the end of that newspaper that were kind of similar to kind of today's crossword puzzles and such. He would have these chess puzzles. He invented his own variants of chess that were extremely popular and last to today. He was considered this great chess mind of his day. He also was Ireland's pistol champion. He won the prize for the best and won some shooting contests and stuff in Ireland and was the national pistol champion. He was considered one of the better people with riding horses. He was a hunter. He would go abroad. He would do a bunch of different things. He was definitely somebody who did a lot of different things during his lifetime. But what really he loved doing was writing. He just loved writing. He loved writing plays, short stories, books, novels, lots of sort of things. And in fact, by the time he passes in the mid-50s, he's published more than 90 different works across a variety of different fields with a variety of different sort of influences to them and who they were influencing themselves. Some of his works are so influential, we're going to be looking at many of them throughout this channel, including a fantasy novel he wrote in the 20s called The King of Elfland's Daughter, which was heavily influential on modern fantasy and writers like Neil Gaiman. Also, we're going to be looking at The Gods of Pegana, which is his quintessential book written in 1905. And it was so outside the box, he had to kind of publish it on instead of with the publisher taking on all the things, he had to kind of publish it on spec, which of course he's probably able to do because he's such a big name and a member of the nobility. So The Gods of Pegana is basically a mythos that he creates for a made-up world called Pegana. And so what each of these has these little short vignettes that tell one of the various myths of the world that he creates. So what he does is he's basically creating the mythos of an entire world as a part of this book. It's not a fiction book. It's not in the sense that he's got like a plot from the beginning to end. It's not. It's a fictional reference work for a world that he has created, which is very different. It's not something that ever happened before. Now, if you are coming to this from 2018, 2019, and you're now reading this book, you might have read fictional mythology stuff since then, a sort of a fictional reference book for a world that doesn't exist. It's something you might read about in games. It's something that happens for video games, board games, role-playing games. Other writers have done it for their world. For example, one of the people that, Tolkien read this stuff. He was, also from the Isles. And a lot of people probably think he probably got some of his ideas of how to create the mythos of his world, Middle Earth, based on, in part, the mythos that Dunsany creates for fictional works. And lots of other writers have done that as part of the backstory of their worlds, particularly with fantasy, although it's also been true with science fiction and other works too. So this man is considered just an absolutely inventive kind of a person. Everybody who wrote at about the same time he did really thought he was influential. A lot of people took it and ran with it. There's a lot of sort of people that are writing in, this sort of a Dunsany style, either at the time that this book was published, as well as some of his other books, or right afterwards. For example, H.P. Lovecraft will famously write some of his earlier stories in kind of a Poe-esque style, but then after he really sorts of encounters a lot of Dunsany stuff, He'll then move and start writing a lot of his short stories in sort of instead of a Poe style, instead of a Lord Dunsany style. So he kind of changes his kind of tone partway through his writing career. And he's heavily influential in a lot of different things, like horror, for example. H.P. Lovecraft would take a lot of his horror concepts straight from Dunsany's works, particularly The Gods of Pegana. Now, in The Gods of Pegana, what happens is that Lord Dunsany kind of creates this really interesting and fun and evocative mythos that's not your typical bunch of good guys, bunch of bad guys fighting together like you might find in sort of, the Greek gods or the Roman gods or even the Norse gods. Instead, they are very different. They're individualized. They have different sort of relationships with each other and such. Now, Dunsany writes this in sort of an Old English, King James Version style of writing. And what that does is, instead of making it stuffy, it actually makes it really feel more mythic in its level. In fact, actually, what I'm actually going to do for you is read for you the second story in this book. Now, all these stories are super fast. The first story, it's a half a page in this book that just goes over the creation of the Gods of Pegana. And the second story is about the creation of Skarl the Drummer by the creator Manawydh Shushay. So we're going to read to you, I'm going to read to you this for you now. It's a page and a half, it'll probably take me 3 minutes or so to read through it. But I want you to get a feel for who Dunsany is and how his style of writing this book, and he wrote other things with different styles, but his style of writing this is just perfectly suited for the theme, and just kind of how outside the box this is. Imagine reading this in 1905. Ready? Here we go. Of Skarl the Drummer. When Manawydh Shushay had made the gods and Skarl, Skarl made a drum and began to beat upon it that he might drum forever. Then, because he was weary after making of the gods, and because of the drumming of Skarl, did Manawydh Shushay grow drowsy and fall asleep. And there fell a hush upon the gods when they saw that Mana rested, and there was silence on Pegana save for the drumming of Skarl. Skarl sitteth upon the mist before the feet of Manawydh Shushay, above the gods of Pegana, and there he beateth his drum. Some say that the worlds and the suns are but the echoes of the drumming of Skarl, and others say that they be the dreams that arise in the mind of Mana because of the drumming of Skarl, as one may dream whose rest is troubled by sound of song, but none knoweth, for who hath heard the voice of Manawydh Shushay, or who hath seen his drummer? Whether the season be winter, or whether it be summer, whether it be morning among the worlds, or whether it be night, Skarl still beateth his drum, for the purposes of the gods are not yet fulfilled. Sometimes the arm of Skarl grows weary, but he still beateth his drum, that the gods may do the work of the gods, and the worlds go on. For if he cease for an instant, then Manawydh Shushay will start awake, and there will be worlds nor gods no more. But when the last of the arm of Skarl shall cease to beat his drum, silence shall startle Pegana like thunder in a cave, and Manawydh Shushay shall cease to rest. Then shall Skarl put his drum upon his back and walk forth into the void beyond the worlds, because it is the end and the work of Skarl is over. There may arise some other god whom Skarl may serve, or it may be that he shall perish, but to Skarl it matter not, for he shall have done the work of Skarl. That's Skarl the Drummer. Again, that's the second story in this book. You can kind of see how fast they are. These are kind of vignettes that really flesh out the world. But the idea of the god who just created the world getting drowsy and sleepy, has this drummer who plays until he stops drumming, in which case the world will be made anew, and Skarl goes off and finds somebody else to go serve, is a very evocative concept. And it's not something you would normally read about in a typical mythos work. You're not going to read about this, for example, in a mythological work set in any mythos that you're reading about, whether it's the Indian mythos or whether it's something like the Celtic mythos or whatever. This is it's very different, and yet it's still very grounded, because Dunsany's style of writing for this particular work is so sort of classic and elegant that it elevates what he's talking about. And again, it has this little kind of funny ironicness to it. The idea of a drummer that's drumming at the drums of this high god that keeps him asleep. I mean, it's kind of funny, right? It's kind of evocative, but it's funny in a good way. It has that sort of humor to it that really, I think, works and works well. The gods are capricious. They're oftentimes doing bad things to their worshipers and so forth. And there's a lot of this probably, a lot of people out there think that this really heavily influenced Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. Many other people that came afterwards with this kind of concept that the gods are not on your side, they're not your friends, they're definitely against you, and they don't even know you exist, and if they do, better watch out. So, this idea kind of his kind of malicious, capricious deities in the world of Pagana is one that definitely resonated with a lot of people. It was so different and so interesting. And so, again, I read you that story. I'm not normally going to read you parts of these reviews, but I think it was important to kind of show you where this is. And imagine, again, if you read that in 1905, you've never read anything like that before, this sort of mythos creation that Dunsany does. It's just so outside the box, and it resonates with people. It sells very well. Puts Dunsany on the map, and allows him to write a lot of other things to follow. He'll actually write a sequel to this too, which we'll probably do a review of in a future book, as well as, again, some of his other books and stuff that have been hugely influential and that are very good and which you may not have ever heard of before. Anyway, today I want to look at the Gods of Pagana. It's a very, very well-known stuff. Dunsany's hugely influential. If you have read it, great. I'd love to hear about what you thought about it. Do you like it? Or do you think he's overblown? Do you think his writing style doesn't work as well as I think it does? I'd love to hear more. What's your favorite one of the gods or the stories in the book if you've read it? Love to talk to you about those things in the YouTube comments below. If you've never heard of it, check it out. It's hugely influential because it's a small book. Each of the mythoses can be read, in a very short time, as I just did for you. You can probably read it in a few hours and be done with it. It's pretty easy to read, and it's not something you have to read back to back to back. You can read like one, myth a day or something like that, here and there for a few minutes. I actually spent my lunch break reading it a couple days ago. It's not a long read, but it's hugely influential. If you've heard of it but you never got a chance to, check it out. You're going to really enjoy it. It's really powerful stuff. It's worth your time. It's worth a read through. Dunsany has been sort of added to some of the canon of English writers. You can sometimes find his stuff, in sort of the Penguin Classics lines and stuff like that out there. So you can find his work that has sort of been canonized. So his name is something out there that you may very well have heard of before. You may have read these things before. If you have enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe. This is not going to be the last video that talks about Dunsany or these sorts of topics. And if you enjoyed this, there's going to be a lot more to come. Please check us out with a subscribe on the button. And if you made it this far, hey, thank you so much once again for taking some time out of your day to invest in this video. I know we all have busy lives and busy times, so I appreciate that you were able to take some time out of your day. Once again, thank you.